Who is the GOAT of MLW? You see many GOATs in other sports, meaning obviously greatest of all time. For example, in the NFL, there's Tom Brady. In the NBA, there's LeBron or Michael Jordan. And in women's tennis, there's Serena Williams. But what about wiffle ball and MLW to be specific? MLW took to their Instagram earlier this year to make a post about who the fans thought would be the MLW GOAT of the Meadows era. Here's the graphic right here. And it obviously led to a lot of discourse in the comments as people are still thinking about this today. Some people think it's Kyle Schultz of the Wildcats, some people think it's Jimmy Norp of the Diamondbacks, and some people think it's Ryan Cratch of the Predators. Now, first, I think to look into this more deeply, we need to go into every player's career more specifically, because right now, I'm not really just looking at the GOAT of the Meadows era, I'm looking at the GOAT of the entire league of MLW since the day it started. But before we start, make sure y'all subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss any extra MLW content. We're getting close to 600 subs and I want to keep growing, so yeah, make sure y'all subscribe and also comment who you think the GOAT is. Now, to fit this criteria, there needs to be a couple things to set the stage. For example, the first one I'm going to say is you have to play at least 4 years in the MLW to make the list that I'm going to be talking about today. There have been some great players such as Jordan Robles, Grant Miller, but I feel like those guys have had such a short career up to this point that they don't really qualify for this list. The second thing I'm going to say is these players need to be two-way players. They need to be able to pitch and hit because, for example, there are a lot of players in the league who go both ways. So I think the GOAT of the league has to have high expectations and therefore has to play both ways. Third of all, I think that this list will only really come down to 4 players, and we're going to talk about them right now. The first one I think is Ryan Cratch, as he of course was on the list, and any respecting MLW fan will agree that he at least needs to be talked about in this conversation. The second guy is Kyle Schultz, the creator of MLW, the commissioner of MLW, and he has been playing wiffle ball for over 14 years now, so he is extremely experienced. Of course we have to talk about him. Third is Jimmy Norp. He only really started playing about 5 years ago in the MLW, but his impact has been so strong. Of course, he's run multiple championships, and overall, he's been super influential in the game. He's the one who actually introduced me into MLW. I remember my brother said there was this guy named Jimmy Norp, and he has long hair, and when he strikes somebody out, everyone says, "Get Norped," which I soon realized was not really true, but it's still a funny saying. And of course, the fourth guy is going to... wait a second. Is that Stephen McGlade? What the... No, I'm just joking. Of course, the fourth guy, in my opinion, was going to be Tommy Coughlin III, but all of his accomplishments and achievements kind of boil down to a slightly worse version, or actually a lot worse version of what Kyle Schultz has done. So let's just focus on these 3 guys who are on the list specifically. Kyle Schultz has been playing wiffle ball ever since 2010 when the league first started up, and of course he is the commissioner of the league. But right now we're going to be looking at if it is even viable to say that the GOAT could have played in this era, because as you are about to see, the stats and accomplishments that you can get from this era are number 1, not super well documented, and number 2, not telling at all. Back in the day, in the first season of MLW, there were only 2 teams, the Western Wildcats and the Eastern Eagles. But at this time, as you can see from the pictures, the teams were not only wildly outmatched, but there was only 5 players in the league. So Kyle Schultz and Tommy both batting over 500, while each hitting nukes off of Tommy's sister, isn't something I'm really looking for in the GOAT debate. I do understand the league's humble beginnings, it's something they should be proud of, but we're not going to really go back to it. And since the Wildcats won the championship this year, the only thing I can really consider from the season is the fact that Kyle had an amazing impact on MLW. That's really the only thing I get from this, and that's really the only thing I'm going to get from the non-Meadows era until we get later into his career. The 2011 season is more of the same, except they did add one more team, but of course the Wildcats and Kyle Schultz still took care of business, and it wasn't really a close race to the World Series at this point. So once again, I feel like I can't really give Kyle too many points for this. Then comes 2012 and 2013, which again, the Wildcats won both World Series this year. But the difference is that they actually expanded a team every year. So in 2012, they added the Nighthawks, and in 2013, they added the Pacific Predators, the same ones we know and love today. However, during this era, there were still people like this guy putting up straight Wilt Chamberlain numbers. So it's hard for me to say if this era is even prevalent in the GOAT conversation, because I don't really think the dimensions of the field at this point were as exact as the ones in the Meadows are, and once again, there's only 5 teams. Then in 2014 and 2015, the Wildcats bounced back from the 2013 loss, and they actually win back-to-back. However, at this point, there was only 4 teams in the MLW, like the Astros. Teams like the Predators had dropped out of the league, and now we move on to 2016. In 2016, Tommy left to go start his own team, but at this point, Kyle was still putting up really dominant numbers. The Wildcats and Kyle did lose the World Series to the Eagles that year, who won their first ever, and then the next year, the Mallards were able to win it, the team that Tommy was able to take over. Then in 2018 comes the Meadows era, aka where MLW switched their field, and this is where I'm going to start looking at Kyle's stats and achievements using that graphic that they posted on Instagram, so let's take a look right now. So here are the stats from Kyle Schultz. He has won 2 MVPs, which is very impressive. Won 1 World Series, that was in 2018. He's had 3 appearances, 1 World Series MVP, 3 division titles, 51 home runs, 194 hits, which is in my opinion the most impressive, and 1 Golden Glove. He has definitely have some of the best stats. I think some of the Instagram comments on this post are pretty disrespectful, like Kyle tried to sneak himself in here. No, he didn't. This is obviously one of the greatest players in MLW history, and even in the Meadows era, you don't have to lie about it, you don't have to try and fake it. Kyle Schultz is one of the greatest of all time. Now, while these awards and accolades and stats do show a lot for Kyle Schultz, they don't show everything, so I figured I'd put everything season by season for Kyle Schultz once we start in the Meadows era. As you could see in 2018, that was his best year from the plate, but that year there was a lot of guys that were hitting super well, so I don't want to discredit it, but I will kind of nudge it towards the direction of the not Meadows era. 2024 was probably his worst year as he took himself off the mound and kind of became just a one-way player, and that's where he stands today. Other notable areas include his 2021 season, which was amazing from the plate, batting .464 in an era where that wasn't super hard to do. Also, his 2022 season, he had a pretty low ERA, was one of the best aces in the league at a 1.48. So these are just some things to look at for his stats before we move on to Ryan Cratch. Now, if I'm being honest, this original video idea was just supposed to be about Ryan Cratch and why I thought he was so good, because he's one of those guys that has pretty much surpassed Father Time. He can do it all, and every year he is almost getting better and more dominant, adding more things to his arsenal on the mound, and hitting the ball better as well. He's just one of those guys that feels like he can never start to regress, which is something that is pretty rare in the MLW, because guys like Kyle Schultz, who are so dominant, are now kind of being looked at as third, second options on their team right now, whereas Ryan Cratch is a 4-time MVP and probably will win it this year. I mean, even if you look at his stats this year, he already has 5 home runs in just 6 games, and also he's batting .400 from the plate. His ERA is a 1.09, and keep in mind that the Predators are 3-3, so he's not doing this with a completely loaded roster. He is doing it all by himself, and doing it while being an incredible leader as well. The one knock on his game a couple years ago was that he just didn't walk enough. And then what did he do last year and at the start of this year? He started walking more. I mean, he is a complete all-around two-way player and undoubtedly the best player in the league. However, that's not what this video is about. This video is about the GOAT of MLW overall. So by doing that, we have to go back and look at his first couple seasons and where they've led him today. So if you didn't know, Ryan Cratch's rookie year was just at the start of the Meadows era, which actually gives him a really good case when it comes to talking about his stats, because they are all pretty well in line and realistic. The one thing you'll see from these stats, though, is consistency. The last 4 years he's batted over 300, and it has been generous over 300. He's hit so many home runs as well. The one year he wasn't the best at hitting was in 2020, of course, but look at his ERA, .96, And if you look at last year's ERA at a .86, that is just so dominant. Of course they had to give him the MVP award. And I guess it's that time to address the elephant in the room, which is that Ryan Cratch has won 4 MVPs, the most in league history by far. Then there's another thing to talk about, of course, which is that Ryan Cratch has struggled to win. He has only won one World Series, and it was very early into his career. And if you just look at his playoff performances, they're usually not the best compared to his regular season. I mean, if you just look at this past year, he didn't bat very well at all, but he did pitch pretty decently. This is something that Jimmy Norp did not have a problem with. And of course, honestly, all 3 of these players are technically 3-way players because they are also managers and make GM decisions for each of their teams. So that's something I have to look at for Ryan Cratch, and it's something that I don't think he's done a great job of. Yes, I know Alec Warda is also a manager there, but that team has struggled, and I've said it in multiple videos, to put together a championship-ready team. I mean, even last year, was that team really ready to win a championship with the way that Alec Warda and Brendan Russell were playing? So I know fans are going to be making the argument that it's not Ryan Cratch's fault that he hasn't really won much, but also it kind of is his fault because despite not getting there for the last 5 years, he continues, and Alec Warda, they both continue to throw out a very similar roster every year. So that's something that I think fans need to look at before calling him the GOAT. It's something that Jimmy Norp hasn't really struggled with, and moving on to him, he's a guy that I think commands a ton of respect from the players. If you looked under MLW's post about who the MLW GOAT was, listing all their accolades, there was a lot of player support behind Jimmy Norp. I don't know if that's something that he has just brought upon himself because he's a great person, a great leader, or if that's something that is genuinely true, because there was a lot of player comments saying that they believe that Jimmy Norp is the GOAT and that it's not even close. So here are Jimmy Norp's stats throughout his entire career, which is crazy because it feels like he's been playing so much longer. As you can see, his hitting has been declining every year, which is something that I think he's going to struggle with, but I do think it will go up in 2025. I think that's just been some kind of random coincidence, but his ERA is always really solid. These last 2 years, he has been amazing from the mound, so that's something that I'm sure he will continue as he goes on in his career, but it's just crazy to me that he has done all these amazing things and has only played 5 full seasons in the MLW. I'll bring up the graphic once more, but now I think it is finally time for me to say who I really think the GOAT of MLW is. So who is the GOAT? Well, let me get a drum roll. In my opinion, the GOAT of MLW is undoubtedly Kyle Schultz. It is pretty close, in my opinion, to Ryan Cratch and Jimmy Norp. They are guys, though, that have only really been playing for 5 and 7 years, so I just can't call them the GOAT yet. Keep in mind, Kyle is the commissioner, the creator. He's done so much. He is almost like the Wilt Chamberlain of the MLW. He's just the guy that has been there and played the longest and had the most experience. And in my opinion, we're not at a point in MLW where we can start calling guys the GOAT who weren't there from the start because the league hasn't been around that long. So it has to be Kyle Schultz as of right now, in my opinion. However, I think once Ryan Cratch and Jimmy Norp retire, we can go back and take a look. I think they are close. I think they can do it, but I do think that the GOAT race is still currently happening. That might sound like kind of a boring answer to you guys, but I'm sorry, it is the right answer. The MLW GOAT is Kyle Schultz. Thank y'all for watching this video. Make sure you put in the comments who you think is the GOAT. I'll have 3 different pinned comments, and you can like the comment who you think the GOAT is just so I can see. I think it'd be interesting. But yeah, make sure to subscribe. I know it was a long video, so if you made it all this way, I really appreciate it. You know, we're coming up on 600 subs. I'm trying to get to that 1,000 mark before the season ends. And also, I'm doing a giveaway once I hit 1,000 subs, giving away some MLW drip. So make sure you do that. There's an Google Forms in the description that I'll show you guys. But before I end this video completely, I have a quick public service announcement for MLW. Okay, so here's my little public service announcement about the MLW Wiffle Ball website. For a lot of this video, I had to use this guy named Sean References. I'll put his Instagram in the description if you want to check out his spreadsheet to try and figure out a lot of these stats because this website is so dang hard to use for no reason. For example, I'm on MLW 2020 and I scroll down. I'm trying to look at Alec Ward's stats. Okay, he bats 182, right? Let's say I'm trying to look at it for next year. So I click on MLW, I click 2021, and all of a sudden it brings me to a different team. That is annoying enough. But the fact that some of the players and stats are just weirdly out of order, the fact that there's no draft history or transaction report, which would be super helpful, and there's also just some other things that this thing is missing. I don't want to go completely into detail, but I just hope somebody from MLW, they probably won't, but sees this and maybe thinks, hey, maybe we should update the website a bit because it's pretty hard to use. Also, the game results are just very interesting, a little disorganized. There's some things about this. I know it's not that big of a deal. Like, if you're just trying to find someone's stats, it's relatively easy. But for people like me, like, I was going to make a video about the entire history of the MLW. It's something I still want to do, but this website makes it really, really hard because it just doesn't give me enough information. Okay, I just need to get that off my chest. But, anyways, thank y'all for watching. Love y'all. Make sure y'all subscribe, and peace.